believe in opening government that this digital personhood has to be protected. And we think that a consumer-based model allows us to do this. What is a subscription-based model and why is it particularly good? Because this is one where people pay to use for the site and the services of the site. Meaning the relationship is purely fiduciary, Madam Speaker. Corporations and their role only in social media sites is to maintain the community and the space, maintain that the servers are working, maintain that the connectivity between people are working, and people have complete control over the information. But that doesn't preclude that they can offer many other services, as I will talk about later on. And why do we think this is good? I want to talk about three things in this speech. First is why this transfers the power to the user, rather than the social media site and the corporations that actually buy information. Secondly, why do we think the access will not be inhibited? Because we're predicting opposition bench will say, look, there's a paywall to access social media. We will say that it's actually not going to happen. Thirdly, we talk about why we prevent harmful social norms. Firstly, why this transfers power to the user rather than the social media site. Recognize that social media, ladies and gentlemen, has in its inception created the concept of digital personhood, right? Because of the relationships, interactions, likes, dislikes, and the community engagement that happens in social media sites, it has the capacity to affect real-world interactions, ladies and gentlemen, as seen in the manifestations of activities of individuals. The biggest example of this is how it affects political choices in status quo, how it can shape narratives of individuals and particular interests in the political sphere. And that is the reason why, in principle, social media has become a public space, ladies and gentlemen. That is the reason why social media inherently has followed community standards, such as banning pornography and banning violence, because it is trying to imitate society and the laws and norms by which society has engaged in. Why is this particularly important in today's debate? Because a subscription-based model allows people to take control over their own interactions. Why is that so, Madam Speaker? That is because of the leverage, that the money is now in control of the user, ladies and gentlemen. They can, at any point in time, withdraw their subscription at the point in which they don't feel that this engages them in a community level, ladies and gentlemen. Rather than in a comparative world where ad money drives the force and frames the newsfeed, ladies and gentlemen. And we can see this, right? Because by likes and dislikes, it dictates the types of newsfeeds that we see, the products that corporations try to sell us, ladies and gentlemen. We believe that if in a subscription-based model, people are allowed to take control of that interaction. Because now people dictate and decide whatever forms of content gets published in social media, right? And that your newsfeed is no longer controlled by corporations or the social media site, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, we think this is a more, I'll take your point later, this is a morally correct relationship to espouse, ladies and gentlemen, because we want a community where people shape the interactions and one that where we don't manufacture the choices of people in this community or in this space. That is the reason why advertisements in status quo have particular limits, right? We can only advertise in particular areas, ladies and gentlemen, and ban things such as advertising alcohol, for example, because we believe, ladies and gentlemen, as a society, that once we shape the choices of individuals and that social media is an interactive space for that, we want them to have the power to control whatever interactions they have in this site. Before I move on to my second point, yes.
Are you opposing all advertisement altogether in this setting?
Of course, advertisement can still exist in our services, right? The difference here is that the social media site doesn't take control over your newsfeed, ladies and gentlemen. Where individuals are sold products, ladies and gentlemen, where individuals are shown products that they would have not otherwise seen, ladies and gentlemen, if they had the choice against it. But further on, we think in principle, if people have control over the subscription method and their information is not being sold to companies, then we'd rather prefer that world. And I think the burden of this side of the house is one where social media sites sell information to corporations, ladies and gentlemen, and actually pinpoint particular individuals that might be interested in products. This is an abhorrent world, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, why do we think access will not be inhibited? Because we have to recognize that social media also needs to make profit, right? And that's the reason why we think these individuals will formulate niche markets and provide a model of tiered pricing. So to individuals that dare not pay, for example, we would have a lower pricing for these individuals or a bundle subscription. The point is, the niche markets will be able to create models by which corporations can competitively offer services to different types of individuals. And we would celebrate a plethora of more social media sites under this model, right? But the most important thing is this. how do we frame the behavior of corporations in opening government, right? Because instead of offering advertisements in order to keep the social media surviving, right? What they would rather do is formulate better services for their individuals, right? That allows for more interactions, right? So for example, Facebook is not just engaging in the services platform, but also improving connectivity platform by establishing like fiber cables to the Philippines, for example, or to many other developing nations, because they realize that infrastructure and the connectivity that is relevant to their service allows for more interactions, ladies and gentlemen. We want them to compete in that particular sphere rather than selling the information of individuals that is crucial, ladies and gentlemen, to their digital personhood. Lastly, why do we think that an ad-based model propagates harmful social norms? Recognize that social norms are created naturally by a majority of individuals liking the norm, right? What corporations do is they capitalize on this norm by capitalizing on harmful beauty standards, for example, because it is easy to capitalize on the popularity of influence by being able to buy likes, for example, or buy a following, ladies and gentlemen, and trick individuals into believing that this is the popular trend. This is something that you have to follow, ladies and gentlemen. In the comparative, in our world, influencers are more genuine, ladies and gentlemen, because they're not trying to actively sell products, rather they're trying to actively sell their lifestyle, ladies and gentlemen. And the difference there is, this is not controlled by corporations, ladies and gentlemen. People have the full agency to decide whatever content appears on their community. And if they don't want to see an ad, for example, they can not follow and they can unsubscribe to that ad as much as they want, ladies and gentlemen. Rather than a world where social media frames that discussion, rather than a world that frames the discourse around that. We believe that people should have the right to reclaim their identity in social media. And we on Opening Government proudly support this movement.
Thank you very much. For those of you who just entered, please speak on the minimum. That's called hello.
Before the internet, there was television and there was radio. And the thing that distinguishes modern forms of communication over the traditional ones is that one form has always placed the consumer as a passive one. As a person that could only consume content that was created by MNCs and broadcasting corporations, rather than being active content creators of their own. The sort of model that imposes a subscription model on the internet, on social media sites, is a model that will lead to the balkanization of the internet. Exactly the thing that the founders of the internet were afraid of 20 years ago, and it also leads to the monopolization of content creation by established institutions who already have power. Before I talk about extension material, although I suspect that much of my rebuttal would constitute extension anyway, let's talk about the things that opening government runs. Firstly, they claim that they transfer power to users, and that's where the framing of opening op comes in. We told you that they could have pulled out of social media sites in either scenario, because on both sides of the house, either that they are consumers and they can choose to get out of social media if they want to. Subscriptions have always been free on our side. They're under no duress to log on to Facebook, right? But the difference is that on our side of the house, they can participate as content creators. On their side, they cannot participate as content creators, or in many instances, they will not, because consumers find that social media sites, the utility that might provide in their lives might be elastic much of the time, and as a result, they will be unwilling to pay the subscription price necessary for them to access social media sites and post as content creators on YouTube, or on Facebook, or on Reddit, or what have you. And as a result, this leads to the lack of counter-narratives being formed that does not provide power to users, it removes power from users. More importantly, your own model already uses algorithms as well to show advertisements, because advertisements and algorithms will still exist under your model. The crucial difference is we have no control over what is shown to us as users. We have no ability to set up Facebook pages of our own to talk about other things that may not otherwise have been talked about by established corporations. The next thing you want to talk about is about how you don't exclude people. I've already given you the economic analysis as to why a significant number of consumers either cannot, especially in developing countries, pay for these things, or will not, even if they could pay for it, because they don't see it at the beginning as essential to their lives. So who actually has money to pay to show content and participate in these social media sites? These are the established institutions. That is bad. But more importantly, to the extent that you want to talk about niche markets, doesn't that exactly lead to the balkanization and the fragmentation of social media sites and of the internet space more broadly? It means people don't have the power to be able to access other groups and to be able to talk to these groups, precisely because in order to access these niche markets, you have to buy the bundle deal that these new social media sites are going to give you. That is nonsense. And to the extent that you care about infrastructure development, like Facebook already does this anyway when they decide to send a fucking satellite into space in order to ensure that more Indians have access to the internet. Because they realize by having more consumers on social media, they can sell more ads. I mean, this is non-mutually exclusive benefit. The last thing I want to talk about is about how it harms social norms apparently. So, like 3 responses, right? The first of which is, 1, this already existed in a world without the internet. It's going to exist in a world with internet anyway, except that the beauty standards that are going to be shown will be dictated by your L'Oreals of the world and your Triumphs of the world and the Victoria's Secrets of the world, because we cannot come up with counter-narratives because we don't have content creators on our side. Also, it's a sort of lazy characterization of where the balance lies, right? Because they merely insert examples of how this might be a bad thing, and then we don't actually know how unbalanced this plays out, given the fact there are many people and many counter-narratives existing in this sphere. But I'm going to move on, no thank you, to how this looks like on our side of the house, on our side, right? The first argument I want to make is about the fact that you will lose much social content. Why? Here's the framing. The vast majority of speech on the internet is not political in nature. Like, many things that people talk about are mundane. The hobbies that they want to discuss, be it about sports, like Manchester United and football, or the NBA. Things like cultural exchange, where people discuss like who their favorite K-pop stars are, or academic academic sharing of papers over like file sharing websites for free, rather than relying on established journals and having to go through a paywall. These are all the mundane forms of things that people do on the internet that form 99% of the interaction of the internet that you will stand to lose out precisely because it's going to be a lot harder for people to participate financially in internet discourse. And to the extent that we talk about speech that's political, the problem with their principle is that it extends to forums and Reddit, it extends to blogs, it extends to the creation of free websites, because now that you focus on a subscription model rather than ads, there is no incentive to provide these like things and platforms for free. This also parallels the debate on net neutrality. At that point in time, the majority of people on the internet are going to be excluded from such discourse. First thing that I want to talk about, therefore, is about the loss of social contact and the loss of discussion of things that are truly important to them. The problem with today is that, in your world, rather, is that many people will be incentivized to just continue talking with their own social circles instead of accessing, social media platforms on the internet where you can talk to complete strangers online, through Discord, through Facebook, through all these things. I'll get closer in a bit. And as a result of that, we reduce the ability of ordinary people to share a lot of things that mean a lot to their lives. The loss of meaning, of contact, and of social interaction for millions upon millions of people who rely on the free nature of the internet and of social media websites in order to make some meaning out of their lives. It also leads to a loss of ideas and innovations, because to the extent that services like GitHub are no longer free, like file sharing websites are no longer free and rely on a subscription-based model, there is a whole bunch of academic and business activity that will be a lot harder to accomplish unless you are an institutional investor and you can afford these subscriptions. Fine.
Okay, so Netflix is $7 a month and Facebook is probably going to be cheaper. Why will content creators who see the value in sharing mundane things with other people not be willing to make this small thing?
Yes, Mike. If you're a YouTube star, you might find it worthwhile to pay for these things. If you live in Tokyo or you live in Singapore, you might have the incentive to pay for these things. If you're the average person who just wants to post articles he has seen on Facebook, if you're the average person who wants to make their political opinions shared, or like any other opinion on anything whatsoever, you stand to lose out. Like the 1% of content creators that you're talking about are not the 99%. Which is why I also want to talk about the effects on political speech, right? It would be much harder for social movements to be able to mobilize, because now instead of relying on networks of strangers, you are relying entirely on your own immediate social networks. So the prospects of being able to organize are much smaller. 3 additional things I want to talk about on this. The first of which is, while the other side can also use such tactics, spam bots, fake bots, what have you, in order to create counter narratives. Remember, the outcomes of this are uncertain, but in a world in which subscription models are a thing, are the primary thing, the only thing by which you access information, you are basically ossifying the status quo, right? In essence, you provide no opportunity for change, positive or negative, and that cannot be good for progressive movements. And last but not least, we are the ones who can counter official narratives, because in the face of mainstream media monopolizing discourse, or established media companies, like established social media companies monopolizing discourse as well. For all of those reasons, I urge you to go with opening to opposition.
Adil speaks in this debate as if what our proposition from government is to completely eliminate social media as it is. So the first thing I want to do is characterize what really is the world that exists if we had a subscription-based model. Because I don't think it's automatically going to happen that there are absolutely no content creators coming from different strata on our side of the house. Particularly because if you notice in any kind of product that has been invented in the world, the reason why we've gotten to the point of tiered pricing is because if the product is good enough, people will be willing to pay for it, even if they're coming from developing countries. What does this mean for this debate? This means that the kind of world that we're defending coming from government is not a world where there is absolutely no content. We will agree to some extent that probably there are some people who won't log in coming from these individuals in our side of the debate. The second thing I want to say is, it's not also true that in our world, you're completely locking these individuals into this, world where it's still possible for you to meet people from other social circles. The main difference of the debate, and I think this is what opening opposition misses in the debate, is in our world, the main client of Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are not corporations. Their main clientele are the users, and therefore, the way that they shape the entire behavior of the newsfeed, of your advertisements, even we accept them, is that the priority must be the users, and that is what they had engaged in this debate. A few rebuttals before I move to my extension. Because Adil says, with this, big words, I have to, give him props for that. Monopolization of content creation. The first thing I'm going to say is, this assumes that no one will access, as I said a while ago, this assumes that no one will access Facebook and all of these things in our side of the house, which isn't true. Adil already conceded that niche markets will happen, which I think is an important concession to debate, because if there are niche markets, then all we have to prove is that people from within those niche markets have every incentive to access that particular price, which we say is already the bulk of argumentation that Adil provided. The idea that you can have social contact with your friends, the idea that you can post all of these political opinions means that if it is that important for people to do these things, then we also think that they have every incentive to pay for the services that these companies will provide, right? If you're paying for movies that you don't really need in your life with Netflix, why the hell will you not pay for a service that allows you to contact your friends from abroad or even your family from abroad? But the second thing that he said is that there is going to be a monopolization of information because now you're going to skew the information. This is a false comparative because this is unresponsive to the point that Dan already raised in this debate. The comparative is not monopolization versus no monopolization, because in either side, there is a monopolization of information that already happens, because as Dan argued in this debate, corporations have the control of what appears within your newsfeed, because obviously when Facebook creates the algorithm to make sure that their companies are satisfied, they want to make sure that the way that your newsfeed looks like is a way that makes you feel like you have to buy from Zalora or you have to buy from this new shop that you found on Instagram, right? So in that world, we think that the monopolization already exists on our side of the house. But we say that the comparative is on our side of the house. We will agree that probably there are less users, but at the very least, they have ownership of the digital identity that they have, and it is not controlled and manufactured in terms of the choices that they're able to make, right? To which Adil said, well, anyway, and I think this is something that they might say as well, that anyway, in your world, there's going to be advertisements as well, and given that you're giving up your privacy, to some extent, you already know what you're getting into. To which we say that, if the main bread and butter of these social networking sites are corporations, then obviously the way that they're going to shape the newsfeed is to make sure that they get as much information from you, as opposed to creating a service such that you are more comfortable with content creation. What does this mean? This means that in their world, what happens is the main incentive of Facebook is to derive as many content as you as possible that they can sell to the companies are willing to buy, which means that they're gonna post those ads, they're gonna make sure on their page. The point is, and this is what they were unwilling to engage with, is if this is the main bread and butter on their side of the house, then the extent of aggression in dito remain unresponded. Before I move on, yes, closing.
In your world, would Kim Kardashian be Kim Kardashian?
Yes, he has money, he'll sell Kylie lipsticks, she'll sell the contour. Second, what I wanna argue, Madam Speaker, is we will agree that to some extent, social networking sites in their current model can spark change. But I'm gonna argue why it starts an unsustainable form of change. What I would say, Madam Speaker, is in an ad-based model, politics online becomes more toxic with ego changes. Because in an ad-based model, what happens is there's a necessity for the algorithm to make sure that there's no reason for you to leave. That's why in the advent of this ad-based culture, what happens is you have clickbait culture, or you have radical bloggers, right? What does this mean? Three conclusions. The first thing I'm gonna say is there's a proliferation of fake news because given the ad-based model, they're selling your data. What happens is these companies, the news companies, are lulled into a complacency that the kinds of news that they are selling are something that people will believe because they know that the end consumers of the news, of the fake news that they're selling, are people who are already inclined to believe those fake news anyway. So it makes it more effective on their side of the house. The second thing is we see that the process of radicalization through radical opinions, for example, is also easier because the ads are utilized to target individuals who already have the inclination to believe these things anyway. And the third thing that we're gonna say is if it's a too liberal cause, it's unlikely for corporations to support these things, and that's why there's no incentive for social networking sites to prop this up in your Facebook wall. That's why you're more likely to find metal straws as an advocacy on your Facebook wall than to find anything against fishnets because people are profiteering from metal straws. What's the point? We say that it sparks an unsustainable form of social change, and you're already selling your identity, but more importantly, it inhibits you from really accessing the true ideas that exist in status quo. And with that, please vote for opening government. Thanks.
Thank you.
I want to say two things to frame the debate when thinking about how to judge this debate. Number one, opening opposition is very happy to say that in retrospect, we definitely prefer our model because it continues to preserve the freedom of individuals, whether rich or poor, throughout the world, because we believe that an ad-free model is principally much better for social media sites and better for society. Secondly, we also tell you that this is important to preserve because it enables people to see beyond their own bubbles within their communities and have access to information that would otherwise be significantly disadvantaged on their side of the house. A couple of things I want to deal with, right? I'm going to give a broad overview of why we think ad-based models are much better. I think with subscription models, we would not have disrupted news media in the way that we currently do. The reason why large parts of the population are extremely reasonably well educated as the average person is because they have access to things like Facebook, like social media, which taught them a lot more about the world, about issues like feminism, about issues like politics, about issues like what's going on in Bangladesh, for example, for me as a Singaporean. Things like the Arab Spring were successful to precisely because Twitter allowed people to tweet out and even send SMS to people to tell the rest of the world about what was happening. If we had constructed the world in a subscription-based model, the poor Egyptian on the street would have been like, oh shit, I have to pay $5 for my subscription before I can tweet about how Hosseini Mubarak is actively slaughtering people in my country. These things are important to recognize because seeing that this is a retrospective debate, opening government had to also contend with what they were likely to lose in the event where you switch to a subscription-based model. They suck consumers into thinking that they have the freedom and illusion of choice when they actually don't. A couple more things that I want to deal with, right? Let me construct this into the first question, right? Are subscription models necessarily bad? I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why. Is that they tell us that this subscription model is good because it gives power back to the people and prevents corporate capture. I'm going to give you 4 reasons why corporate capture is actually going to be worse. If I can prove this conclusion, we think a lot of opening governance material is out of this debate. Number 1, regarding subscription models, tier pricing is a horrible way to get people to buy into your system because it's a form of discrete censorship. What do I actually mean? This means that there'll be a segmentation of content that's accessible to people depending on how much you pay. Because clearly, if you're paying like $20 per month, you must get something that's like in addition to versus the person who pays $5 a month, right? So what kind of exclusive things will you have access to? You have access to things like premium news content, for example, right? Things like specific things that you can do within Facebook in terms of like giving out your ads or certain controls that you have access to certain data that Facebook will probably give you that it will not give to like the average college student who pays like $3 per month on Facebook. What this then means is leads to a second outcome which Adil talks about, which they didn't respond to. Things like net neutrality become much easier to break because bigger corporations like TNT and Time Warner who continue to control the media. And the reason why this is likely to be the case is because at the point where you revert to a subscription-based model, guess who are the people who are going to be paying most of the top-end subscription? It's not likely to be the average person because they can't really afford it. The premium subscribers are likely to be your corporation, are likely to be your businessmen, are likely to be your rich people who be the ones funding sites like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Why is this a bad thing? Third response, this is a bad thing because at this point, when you revert to a subscription-based model, the group of people who give the most amount of revenue for your company are rich people and the elites. What does this mean? This means that they are the ones who have significant control and influence over how Facebook operates. This therefore means that the idea of corporate capture is actually significantly far worse on their side of the house because the people who pay the most are the ones who are able to dictate what content is seen on the site. This therefore means it is crucial because it allows the richest elite to continuously hold social media accountable and instead give them the ability to turn the screws on social media. Therefore, the ads that you want to talk about, the influence that corporations have that you want to talk about, is going to become significantly far worse on your side of the house, and the rest of the population will be worse off for it because they do not have access to content that they otherwise would. Yes?
Internet access requires telecommunications infrastructure, which still needs to be paid. In developing countries, people pay for text or calls. In this world, people are still willing to pay for these services. Why are they willing to pay for it?
Correct. But services are not worth it, right? Because I pay like $4 or $5, but a lot of content is restricted to me because I'm not a premium subscriber. I think it's pretty easy to understand. I don't really get this idea. Okay, the second broad idea that we hear later on from BPM, right, is that they tell us that not everyone is going to leave, right? That people are still going to be in these social media sites. We agree this is true. But at some point, we need to accept the middle ground in this scenario, where on our side, we can reasonably say that a large amount of people will still leave because they no longer see any utility to their site. Therefore, government had to defend in that scenario, if you have numerous amounts of people still leaving because you don't see value in the site, why are you still okay with subscriptions? The second thing I want to say is that the problem of paying for subscriptions is that people will have to pay subscriptions on multiple sites, right? Because it now becomes the interest of social media to have tiered pricing for different kinds of things. That's why companies like Netflix are being priced out by companies like Disney because Disney is launching its own streaming service, right? So now Disney movies are no longer available on Netflix. If you want to watch those things, you have to watch it on Disney's own paid service. This means that it allows content creators and social media sites to segment the kind of content that's available to people. The more they segment and the more they balkanize this, right, the more people have to pay to access different types of content instead of all the content being integrated into one place. Therefore, people are actually going to fork out large sums of money just to access content. This completely goes against the purpose and the principles of the internet that Adil talked about. This becomes far worse because social media sites that never become the controllers of what people can and cannot see. They become the purveyors of censorship, and we don't think this is a world that we necessarily want to live in either. The next thing I want to say, right, is that this idea that these tell us that corporations are going to extract a lot of information out of you in ad models and somehow this will be changed in subscription models. I'm going to tell you why this is actually far worse on the comparative. Regarding the idea of privacy, on both sides of the house, right, people have to sign T&Cs anyway. That's not really that important in this debate. But why is privacy going to be far worse on their side of the house? ownerships of subscription models means you have certain forms of exclusivity because of the tiered pricing, i.e. the people who have the most exclusive access to the site also are given certain advantages that other people are not. To the extent that therefore privacy is important, clickbait is actually going to become far worse because companies will try and get people to pay more in order to access premium content, right? Like more in-depth analysis about the Arab Spring, more in-depth content or analysis about like what's happening in Japan, for example. These are all ways in which you restrict the ability for the average citizen to access large parts of the internet and social media sites. Don't let them lie to you and get away with the fact that there's going to be some form of like less corporate capture, because subscription models are precisely how corporations thrive, right? There's this thing called in economics called like profit discrimination, price discrimination, sorry, and a lot of companies are able to use this effectively. The last thing I will say is that government assumes a very binary model, right? Either everyone leaves or no one leaves. We don't think this is true. We think these kind of things exist on a scale or a spectrum, as Amrit would put it. Therefore, we think we are relatively reasonable in saying that we agree to some extent that subscription-based model may like prevent like companies from trying to have insidious ads. But they also need to contend with the comparative that large amounts of people will leave social media. They need to contend with the narrative that corporations are actually going to capture your social media site more. You're going to contend with the narrative that more people around the world are going to be restricted because they can no longer turn on the light and see what's going on in the rest of the world.
Thank you. Let's have Rebuttal.
Government is going to enter the debate in a common way. We'll tell you firstly, will the number of users really decrease on our side of the house? Because we will give you reasons why it will not. Secondly, will the content availability be significantly decreased under our side of the house to the extent that opening opposition says it will be? The third argument I'm going to make is a unique harm to social media sites. We think that the most vicious harms of how social media sites are created right now come because they are dependent on corporations who want people to be addicted and stuck to their scenes to be able to get the content that they want across. We think that those harms will be alleviated under our side of the house solely, and that's why we're proud to propose this motion. Let's talk firstly about whether the number of users will really be decreased, particularly in developing countries, as opening opposition wanted. We tell you no. Firstly, this is because prices will not be that high, right? We think that if you have, for example, like billions of users like Facebook does, like Twitter does, like all these social media sites do, then we think that you are able to lower the prices to a significant extent, make it about $1, $2, to the extent that pretty much everyone in this room, and if you are not like abjectly like the poorest of the very, very poor in every single country, you would be able to use it. Secondly, if you're talking about developing countries, these corporations stagger their prices, right? You do not pay the same amount for Netflix that you do in America that you did pay for in developing countries, which means that developing countries and the people there, because like corporations still want more people, right? These SMS corporations still want more people to enter, will create a price level that is still accessible for individuals, and the individuals will still want to pay. But then why will individuals still be willing to pay this price? The reason is firstly, because there are network effects to social media sites, right? If your friends are on it, if your family's on it, then you also want to be on it, because it benefits you to have the access to the same kinds of information that everyone else does, right? Secondly, we think that people don't want to feel left out, and people do actually have a need to express what they feel to the everyday life, and they are not happy with just sharing it with their friends, and they want to share it to a wider world, which which is why you see Instagrammers and YouTubers and people coming up who are from relatively non-privileged backgrounds before, who were able to launch themselves onto the platform and get people to know them and understand them better. We think people will still continue to have those incentives under our side of the house, which is why they will still be willing to pay, right? So secondly, let's go on to content availability. We think content will still be available to the same extent under our side of the house. But let's, before that, concede that to some extent, yes, revenue might fall for social media sites under our side of the house. Yes, we will concede that the number of people might not be, in the thousands of billions, but might be like 1,000 billion or something. Like, yes, there will be a reduction. But we still think that generally the same content will still be available under our side of the house. Why? Because we think that usually what these social media sites are going to do is still allow the majority of services to be available to the most widest number. The reason for that is because these corporations, because consumers will now be the target and how they get their money, will want more consumers to be on their sites, right? Which will mean that they will try to extend the availability of content as wide as possible for these people, because now they are dependent on these people for their daily bread. Which is why the majority of content, like on Netflix, where you can still see the majority of movies, even if you're like an only $7 subscriber like me, are available. The same thing will be true for social media sites. So the harms that Adil talked about, like that they will no longer be able to access news, they will no longer be able to access wider parts of the world, those things will not happen under our side of the house, because that kind of information will still be available and still come on news sites. But we think furthermore, it's not the case that currently, when corporations are allowed, and like the ad-based model is taken, that you have a diversity of content that is not controlled by the richest of the rich and the most elites under their side of the house. Because when you see that corporations are paying for these social media sites, then it's more likely that these social media sites would have the corporations, like, their advertisements take a wider span of the, the news roll, then they would allow your friends to do, or they would allow your other people to do, right? Which means that, like, democratic, normal people do not get as much of a voice and as much of a platform under their side of the house anyway. They are not the ones who are spread to the majority of the world, and they are not the ones who get the majority of exposure. It is still Kim Kardashian, it is still Gucci, it is still the most rich corporations that get the majority of the newsfeed and get the most exposure to people around the world. We think that means that their harms, all of the harms that they talked about, right? About the normal person not getting enough exposure, about the normal person being used up by these huge corporations, that's all going to happen on their side of the house. We think that our side of the house is still relatively better because of the things that I'm going to talk about now. Before we go on closing.
Can you characterize how the biggest social media corporations collect their monetary transactions from the poorest of the poor countries?
Sure, you use things like cell phones and transactions of money, which are still quite a thing, for example, in countries like Nigeria, where still a significant number of people do have access to the internet. If you have access to the internet, we assume you probably have access to some form of internet banking, as is happening in China as well. We think that those things are still viable under our side of the house as well, right? But let's talk furthermore about why the usage of social media sites will still become better under our side of the house than it would under theirs. We think right now the way that corporations and having to rely on ads in order to pay for social media sites affects social media sites right now is that it shifts the incentive of the control. So like opening opposition talks about like the control of the contents of the newsfeed. We're going to talk about how the algorithm itself and how the site itself orients itself to fit the needs of these corporations. Because if you are reliant on corporations for your money and you need to make money in order to pay your employees and in order to make the system running, then because you want more people watching these advertisements and stuck on their media, that's why these corporations now have an incentive to make your social media sites more addictive, make people watch it more longer, make people try to ask their friends to join these sites, make people more focused, and make it impossible, unlike what opening opposition said, for these people to get out of these networks. That is the point at which you take agency from these individuals, because now, no longer do they have a mental mechanism that allows them to stop. We think on our side of the house, you'd rather allow that mechanism to exist, because if you have paid into it, if you know that you are paying money to it, that is the point at which you can say that you want to stop, right? We think also that these corporations would change their incentive, would change their algorithms in a way to make it less addictive to people, or in order to make it more cohesive to the original purpose of social media sites, which was to connect people that you want to connect with and to get information that you want to, right? Which means that individuals would be able to get better interactions with people, because Facebook, for example, would connect them with more people, or would create their algorithms to connect them to interests that they had expressed formally, for example, unlike connecting them to Gucci or to other corporations just because they pay more. And we think that is a more democratic form of getting access to content as exists under our side of the house than on theirs, when they are dependent on these huge corporations for money, right? We think, yes, this might be a small buy-in that has to exist, but this buy-in makes it possible for these social media sites to run without these corporations and to create sites that are less addictive and that people can use as they want to, right? And we think that that is the purpose for which social media sites to exist, which is why we prefer roles like this. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
I don't think Netflix is used in a village in Andhra Pradesh, but Facebook is. This debate is about the poorest and the most vulnerable groups in this debate that have been liberalized and empowered through the access to social media. We will, like most of my speech will be about breaking deadlocks in the upper house because they just don't agree with each other for some reason. So first, I think we need to categorize these countries to begin with. Yes, we agree with OG. There is technology in these countries. Mobile phones and access to internet is widespread. They need economic incentives. There are digital political narratives run in Myanmar, in Bangladesh. Secondly, we agree with them. Prices won't be sky high. It's stupid for a company to overcharge beyond the reason that people can pay for. What they don't understand the nuance of these countries is, these countries are mostly informal, which is to say, the means of cash transaction are not through credit cards, are not through informal bank transfers, but through direct cash-to-cash transfers that are handed to each other on a daily basis. Meaning, we can barely collect tax money from these countries because they're so informal, we don't have a proper estimation of the GDP within our country. What this means is, we don't think this debate and the access argument is about the lack of ability or willingness to pay money, but the means to pay money. So how can they solve this within a model? The way they can solve this is these companies setting up cash collectors within every single state in India, right? So first, that requires huge amounts of investment. By hypothesis, this debate happens in a world in which these companies have not become large at all, which means that investment cannot happen at all. Secondly, this debate happens in a world in which even if you enter these countries, you have to enter it through channels that are controlled by the state, which is to say, you have to take on state-based companies, local businesses, take state regulation as a part of that cash collecting mechanism. Even if it is the best case scenario of internet banking, first, I don't think this exists in most countries. I speak for Bangladesh, it doesn't happen there. Secondly, even if it does, it's localized and not international. You can send money to America. Thirdly, it will probably be regulated by the state heavily as well, where you have to submit balance sheets and information to the Security Exchange Commission that looks at you directly. The conclusion of all of this analysis is simple. It's not about how much you charge, but the lack of incentive of these companies to set up in the most poorest of the poor regions, and even if you do, likely to allow the state to have some degree of influence into censoring the content that you directly possess and pick up. These kinds of indirect influences have happened in countries like Bangladesh, where posts about the student protests were removed because the Facebook had an incentive to create an office within Bangladesh when it wanted to set up a direct individuals basis where they wanted to hire employees. Not taken. Why is this so problematic? And here's where the political hegemony argument is the most important. Political hegemony argument is because you need to have access to uncensored discussions for you to have some level of ability to gain rights. For four things. First, this is the only means by which the poorest of the poor create accountability within their countries. Because literally, all other channels are controlled by the state. The media, the judiciary, the police, the military. Assuming you don't have the access, what is the alternative? CG Win has to tell us how you create this political discourse in their world. I think on a comparative, you not being able to buy the best products for yourself versus you not being able to discuss at all what is important for the state and what is important as a right. Secondly, your access to international media is often through social media because the channels that you would have otherwise used are controlled by the state. The reason why we got BBC and CNN to cover these things was because, by the way, I talked to Harish to get CNN to do it, but more importantly, we have access to these things because #CNN makes a huge deal. Thirdly, organizing protests like Tahrir Square and Arab Springs, where the traffic law protests in Bangladesh were directly controlled by this. But fourth, information that is unfiltered is the basic information by which people understand what their true rights are. If the state has the ability to influence what kind of information these people have the access to, they won't even realize they're oppressed because they feel like that is how the standard of the world works. You need unfiltered access to the most raw kinds of information accessible from anywhere in the world. Any kind of state infiltration reduces this process. It's a comparison. Best case scenario of golf case, we concede to all their benefits. You have to compare to why all of that is more important than these people accessing their rights in our way. But even though we don't okay, now let's engage with their one. Before that, yeah.
But the information about that protest was to some extent overshadowed by advertisements that corporations paid for in a world where the bread and butter are those corporations. How does that magically change in your world?
We didn't care about the butter sale when people were getting shot and we had access to that information. No, this is just untrue. Right? Okay, moving on. Why do we think that then, how do we settle the business debate, the business argument that was set up? We think this is the only means by which you break the conglomerates that control society. Why is this so important? I think I sort of conceded that all other alternative forms of marketing exist, which is mainstream marketing, like TVs, billboards. Three characteristics they have. First, they're fucking expensive. Secondly, they're mutually exclusive, which is to say, if you take up TV airtime, if you take up a billboard, no other company can take that billboard. Thirdly, there's very little targeted reach, which is to say, if you pay for a billboard, it's still our choice. It's still in our hands. This is an added way in which it is further entrenched into our hands, where we have even higher degree of choices because we're exposed to more things. At worst, it allows us to get out of these shackles because we're exposed to narratives that other companies now expose us to. That allows us to access the most important kinds of happiness, which I'm not sure why is morally so pernicious. At worst, even if it is, it's very marginal from the channels of change you already allow in the status quo. What we need to understand in this debate is the most important group are the most vulnerable in the world. They've been liberalized by the social media narratives. We need to allow that to exist. Vega.
It's really difficult for people to be aware of wasted time because that is invisible. But we are aware of wasted money because that's in front of us as a record that you paid $7 to bullshit. That's exactly what we want on our side of the house. The increased attention and increased awareness is only possible and people can get their own agencies to whether or not they use that, whether how they use that is only defined on our side of the house when they are willing to decide to pay something, or decide not to pay something to the internet and to networking systems. That's what we stand on the proposition in today's debate. I'm going to talk about two things. First of all, what is the internal recognition of the actions that users take? And secondly, I'm going to examine the access issue that was the main point that came from the opposition bench. But before that, basically many rebuttals to closing opposition. Now, the first thing they told you is it's not the debate about whether or not they should pay money, but the means to pay that money. Well, first of all, we agree that to a certain extent it starts with developed nations. But the thing is, that will emerge to developing nations as we are already giving them money, as we are already giving them technical expertise and infrastructure development. That isn't not a problem that much, right? Secondly, we think on our side of the house, they shut down access to CNN and so forth. But CNN, well, all those media is still existing on our side of the house too, right? If they assume that those people are too poor to access CNN, probably they don't have the internet system to begin with. Those people are not inside this debate. And also we told you that state channel and state control. Well, we have to recognize that on their side of the house, if they depend on those states to collect money in cash from those citizens, meaning that they should kind of financially incentivize those states to cooperate with that program. Meaning the fact that that state is already incentivized to create a better environment inside that nation in order to attract people into that cash paying. In order to do that, they literally have to make it neutral, right? So we think that state control doesn't stand. And also Arab Spring that came from the opposition that we actually expected. Notice that the Arab Spring was not a movement of the poorest people on the ground. It was also mainly led by middle class citizens living in that, despite the fact that the initiation was very poor people self-burning himself, right? So we think on our side of the house still, social movements are likely to happen on our side of the house, if not perfect, right? And also they told you that they wanted to disempower the big corporations from having disproportionate power, right? We think that is not mutually exclusive because on their side of the house, the only corporations who are financially capable of creating ads and doing so are those big corporations that they want to disempower, right? Look at the situation. On Twitter, the most of the advertisement we see is about Google and Apple, all of those strong environments, right? We think there will be no change whatsoever. Those are the engagements towards closing opposition, and thank you. And one thing that came from opening opposition was content creator will be lost, right? I don't get the mechanism exactly, because on our side of the house, it's people who are paying that money, meaning the fact that they are more aware of what they watch and how the corporation is actually acting, right? Meaning that content will be decided mainly by those people who are subscribing to that, and thank you, just in the same way Netflix is always thinking about consumers' demand when creating contracts and so forth, but YouTube is not, right? So basically talking about, first of all, what the internal recognition of their actions. Opening proposition talked about companies' control without really getting it on the ground. We told you specifically from closing proposition, the ground level of how people use, how people will perceive those things on our side of the house, because that is the crucial issue, right? So opening opposition also rebutted opening for government by saying media control will still exist, manipulation is there. We're going to make this resolved, right? No, thank you. Now, what we specifically told you from closing proposition is that people will become far more aware of what they do when they use those things, right? Because you have to recognize that every end of month you see the record of you paid $7 to Twitter, right? Thank you. It's a significant difference. On their side of the house, no record is there, and people meaning the fact that we are the ones who are increasing the awareness about how they use that, right? The problem with these things is that what is there under their side of the house is sharing internet culture, me with no agency whatsoever, leading to like addiction or leading to more suicide or more kind of like all of those things associated with internet addicts, right? They waste money and do nothing productive and so forth, and those people are not aware of that kind of usage, right? We think that's hugely problematic. We need to reduce that problem associated with those networking and internet culture. And then they told you, thank you. Okay, actually yes. Okay.
Yeah, so if you had to pay a few dollars for the 10 or so sites that you frequent, like Facebook, WhatsApp, Snap, Insta, Twitter, like Reddit and Discord, like consumers will prioritize the social media sites that they prefer, and that leads to the fragmentation of the social media websites that leads to all the harms we talked about with regard to content creation and content access.
Well, we say that preference of social media still exists on our side of the house, so that makes no difference whatsoever if we come substantially like, $2 stuff. And also we told you that now they can monitor corporations more, right? Because not only they are nudging you, but also they're deceiving you and frauding you to taking a lunch limited, because those corporations, they have an incentive to make it to a certain extent cheap and accessible. And also, if they are talking about social movement, if that cause that those individuals want to push is that visceral or that desperate, probably those individuals would rather choose to pay money or $7 a month in order to push that cause, in order to appeal to the general public, that is a big problem. We think on our side of the house, access will be not much damaged, or access will not that substantially important on our side of the house, right? So for all those reasons, we're very happy to continue to propose this motion.
Content in Netflix is $7, and most of the products in Amazon India or Amazon is probably $2 to $3, right? And you understand that vast majority of the people in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan probably buy these products, access these products. But why is it that in 2016, when Amazon was finally worth $800 billion, did Amazon finally decide to enter India? But even after 2 years, their penetration rate is 2%, and of Netflix it's 0.5%. And the reason is very simple. It's that when it comes to payment and payment systems within these economies, you can still simply rely on the payment systems that exist there, because of tons of reasons that Sajid already gave you. Understand that oftentimes when Amazon wanted to enter India, one of the biggest problems that they face, like if we set up a payment network here through one of the existing businesses, what is the security of that payment going to happen? We say that in a lot of instances, all of these monies are just hacked and taken away by hackers, because guess what? SWIFT, or the international banking system transaction that like protects payments from one end to another, isn't necessarily prevalent in vast majority of the states in India, in Bangladesh, Afghanistan, etc. We just say, even when you see Amazon and Netflix in Bangladesh and India, you just see this in the big city centers, in Dhaka, in Mumbai, in Delhi. But not in Andhra Pradesh, not in places like Assam, where you literally have the Indian military massacring people, and the only way that the international media can hold some form of accountability to the government, the only way that people outside can know, the only way that we know about protests in Arab Spring is due to that. And all of this analysis is about 2018, guys. Social media was there in 2007 and 2008. If I ask all of you to name e-payment platforms back from 2010, you couldn't. And that's when the Arab Spring happened, right? That's when Arab Spring essentially happened because Facebook did not have to go to Egypt, pandered to one of its 4 major financial institutions that existed in Egypt, which were controlled by the elites within that country. When, if you are to get access to these particular business platforms, then you would have to have censored some form of media. You don't have to block anything that's anti-government. Where is this example existent? China. When Bing entered China, because it gave up entirely of its control to the Chinese government, in order to establish their business, they had to censor everything. You cannot get anything about Tiananmen protest. But the reason other governments couldn't do this necessarily is because other governments could not block access to basic things like SIM phones and telecommunication network, because these are essentially have economic benefits to people.
But, however, because the payment system wasn't there and the government had to give them access to internet, these governments weren't strong enough to build, the internet wall that China has. However, in a world where the payment was entirely based on these governments, every other developing country government that are either dubiously democratic or authoritarian would have had entirely the control of content. All of that is piggybacked on our analysis because they never mechanize how these people won't get access. Because if you just refute their argument by saying, oh, these people have
Are really that bad in those countries? How are SMEs
7 and 8, I don't know how their arguments apply at this worst case scenario. But in terms of the upper house debate of small corporation versus big corporation that was sort of also extended on CG, you need to recognize that it's not about, in a lot of instances, $10 of boosting businesses. It's in a lot of instances, lipstick sellers of Thanmundi, which is essentially, you just need to build just make a group of certain people and you spread your business through word of mouth. Under our world, this is something that's entirely free. Anyone can do it. They don't need access to credit cards. They don't need access to anything. They can just create a group, add their closest friends, and their closest friends will add their friends, and therefore word of mouth spreads. This is how, essentially, you grow a business from a very small area, and you keep growing, right? And the entirety of the starting of the business was done through a free subscription model. You realize that these small businesses, these small bakeries, cupcake stalls, they grow out of these places, essentially go on to then challenge big bakery conglomerates that OG has so much problem about. In their world, betting up all the ad space in billboards, TVs, and everything else would have necessarily created the oligopolies of the 1980s, where there were only 2 beauty companies, where there were only 2 conglomerates that sold things like shampoo products, soaps, etc. The only thing that allows these small businesses to go up, creep up, and challenge this hegemony is access to these targeted advertisements that they can do through opening up things like groups, etc., etc. In a lot of instances, this applies to developed world as well, because you realize, in terms of boosting advertisements, you just need $10 on Facebook with respect to developed world for small corporations. But if you want to buy up ad space on billboards that cost at least $1,000 per month, you can see the disparity in terms of spending that only big corporations can bear, but small corporations cannot bear. This economic argument applies in 2 different status to developing country and developed country. But the conclusion is the same. Challenging all of those privacy problems that they say in terms of like big corporations, etc., etc. Because if you realize, your privacy can also be hacked subconsciously through TV ads, billboards, newspapers that you are constantly exposed to in the metro, railway, everywhere. It's not as blatant as they would make it sound. But the only way to check on this privacy is through small businesses penetrating into that narrative, is through small businesses challenging the hegemony that corporations have. And those flowery words of privacy don't apply to OG's world. The only way to break them is by CEO's analysis. Incredibly proud to oppose.